Right, so this video is going to focus on AngularJS and using it within an Express.js app, web app. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through a few things, pretty basic I guess. It's going to be setting up the Angular environment and then just showing you a few things that Angular does well. It's not going to be super advanced, so I mean I'm not going to go through HTML5 routing or anything like that. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to stick to the core of Angular and just show you how to get started with it really. Right, so first thing is, what is Angular? So if you're going to be using JavaScript to create a dynamic website, then Angular is a great choice for that. There are a few alternatives like Backbone or Ember, but these are not as widely used or supported as Angular. Right? Angular helps you organize your JavaScript, and it helps you to create fast websites, and fast as in terms of user experience as well. So it's all, think of it as it's all Ajax based, kind of. It's that same principle. So it's a single page application, a SPA is what it's commonly referred to. So good thing about Angular is it's actually maintained by Google, and that means that there's a huge community for it online, a lot of support and a lot of adaptability. And if you have a problem with Angular and you put it into Google search engine, for instance, there's going to be a ton of Stack Overflow questions and answers, and so you're gonna be able to get quite a lot of support for it. Right. So first thing you want to do is you want to go to the AngularJS website. So it's angularjs.org. And if you're brand new to Angular, there is actually, see this button here, Learn Angular in your browser free. It's an excellent short course. I think it takes about 45 minutes to an hour from what I remember, and it just really goes through the basics, and it has some mock test environments, questions, and all sorts of stuff. So I recommend it. It's really quite good. But anyway, what you want to do, you want to come here and you want to download AngularJS. Right, so it's just a JavaScript file, one JavaScript file. That's all you need, right? So once you've got that, you want to include it into your project. So open your project folder, in your JS folder, put it in there. Okay. So the project folder that I'm using for this is going to be the same project I used for the last video, the Express.js. I think I mentioned at the end of the last video I was going to use the Express generator and plug Angular into that, but I'm not going to. What I'm going to use, I thought would have been, it makes it a bit easier to follow, is I'm just going to use the exact environment from the Express video, and we're just going to include Angular into that. And I'll show you, there's one thing, we have to change one thing in the server.js file, and then everything else will be in our, what's it called, our template file. So right, so let's have a look then. So what we want to do is, the first thing we have to do is in our server.js, this is exactly the same as last time, all of this. The one thing that's different is this line here, okay? And all this does is this lets your app know where to look for your include files. So I'm going to be including 2 JavaScript files into this project. So without this line here, it won't include those files correctly. But we add this and it includes them correctly. And this, all I'm saying is, this slash just means the root of my project. So let's have a look. This is my EJS template file. So if you're not sure what I'm talking about there, just watch the previous video and you'll see what all this is about. Right, so what we want to do, first of things first, we want to include our AngularJS JavaScript file, and we're also going to include another file which is called app.js. Right? So AngularJS is what we downloaded from the Angular website, and app.js is going to serve as our main file for our Angular project. Okay, So what I was talking about a second ago with this here, this indicates that the root of my project, okay? So you see here, the source, it starts at the root. If I wanted to change this to be something else like Angular test, then I would need to put that in this path here, okay? But it's best just to keep it to the root for now, and then it's just simple. So anyway, what we've got here is Angular min.js. So let's have a quick look at that. So this is Angular pretty much, okay? This is the minified version. You can get the regular version, but do you know what? We will not be digging into it. So it's best just get the minified version, okay? So that's what that is. And then the other file, UpJS, this is our file, and that's this, okay? So what we've got here is we've got a self-calling function, okay? Use strict for anyone who's done any Titanium development or used CommonJS. This is just use strict JavaScript, okay? So then what we have is to kick off our Angular app, we just have a variable called app. If our app equals angular.module, the name of our app, and then the dependencies for our app. We're not going to discuss this in this video because it will just overcomplicate things, okay? So we'll just ignore that. But this can be anything you want. But what you want to do is you want to take the name you've given it there, go into the main file, your main page of your website, and what you want to do is in the HTML at the top, you just do ng-app equals and then the name that you've given it. And what this says is from this opening tag to this closing tag, this is our Angular app, okay? So you can put this somewhere else if you want. You could just put it on the body or a div in here. But I find for me, I prefer to just put it on the HTML tag and then everything within there is under this app we're creating. Right. So we've done that. Save that. One thing we can do to check that Angular is all up and running is we can do some simple math. But what we'll do is we'll do it in Angular's syntax, okay? So when you want to use Angular variables or even, when you want to use Angular within your web page, what you need to do is you have these curly braces, okay? So that's the opening and closing. So if we want to do some simple math, we can do 4 plus 4 here, okay? So we'll save that. So what we'll get now is if everything's running fine, when we load up this page, we're going to see 8 printed to the screen. If there's something wrong, we're going to see the curly brackets and 4 plus 4 still. So let's start our app. Sorry. So I'm going to change directories into where my app is. Node. So this is all the stuff we went through in the other video, okay? So Express has started. So then let's go over to here. So we're seeing 8, right? So let me just show you if this was not included. Alright. And then we went to the web page. We're going to see this just raw printed out to the screen. And if you see this happen, then a good place to start troubleshooting is check that you've set this ng app at the top and check that the name is the same as this, alright? So that's the best place to start troubleshooting. So one of the very first examples you'll see a lot of places show you at is binding, and two-way data binding is a massive thing in Angular. So a good example of this is two-way data binding, okay? in Angular apps is the automatic synchronization of data between a model and a view. The way that Angular implements data binding, it lets you treat the model as a single source of truth in your application. The view is a projection of the model at all times. When the model changes, the view changes, okay? So what that really means is, if we have a view and a model, when the data changes in the model, which could be something from your API in the background, then the user is going to see that change on screen in real time. So I'm just going to paste in this example. Right, so what we've got here is we've got an input box, standard input text box, right? But we've attached ng model, okay? And we've put your name. And you'll see here in this h1 tag, you see the Angular syntax with the curly braces, and we've put the name of that model, okay? So what this is going to do is when someone types into this text box, we're going to see that text update in this h1 tag as it changes. So let's have a look at that. Right, so as you can see, as I'm typing, it's updating it straight away. No lag, no nothing. And if you think of what we've done there, is we've literally put hardly anything at all. All we've done really is just attach this ng model, and that shows you the power of Angular. In such a small amount of syntax, we've actually got that. And you might think that's not that impressive, but don't think of this as a text box and a name being printed out. Think of it as much more. It could be feedback for anything on your app. It could be a shop. It could be some sort of calculation software. It could be anything that you can think of. This allows instant feedback to the user. There's no JavaScript functions. There's no nothing. We haven't had to write. Like if we were writing this in JavaScript or even jQuery, then it would be a lot more than this. Okay. So that is two-way data binding. Right, so what I'm going to try and do is I'm going to try and just go through a couple more things, right? So let's get rid of this. So what about if I have a variable in my, what about if I have a variable in the back end and I want to print it onto the screen, right? So what we do is we create a controller, okay? And you can have as many controllers as you want, and all you need to do is make sure that an element on the page that you're viewing knows to look into that controller, okay? So let's have a look at the syntax of this. So we've got app, and that is just referencing our Angular module. So we've got app.controller. So we're going to create a controller, right? And I shouldn't say directive. Right, so then first argument, you give it a name. The second is the actual function. But what you'll see here is I've got this word scope. So you have two different scopes. You have a root scope and you have scope. So scope means the variables contained in this controller exist to this controller only, okay? So if we had another controller and we tried to reference this variable called myvar, it will know nothing about it and it will come back as undefined. But if we use something called root scope is like a global variable. So if you create a variable with root scope and you reference it in a different controller, you will have access to it. Okay, hope that makes sense. But we're not dealing with root scope here, we're just dealing with scope. So what we're doing, giving it the name of first controller, we're saying, this is called dependency injection. So what we're doing is we're telling it we want to deal with scope, and then within here we're saying scope dot variable name equals my first var, right? So if we want to print that to the screen, what we need to do is we need to come in here and we need to let the app know that we want to use this controller. Okay, so I'm just going to do it in the body, and what I'll do is I'll do ng.controller equals, and then the name of the controller. Okay, so now what we're saying is everything from this opening tag to its closing tag has access to that controller. So think of that in terms of not just static variables, but within here you could do API calls, you could have functions, you could do all sorts of stuff. So then that would mean that this element and everything, every child element would have access to it. Okay, so we want to print out this variable. So what we do, same as before, opening, closing, and we put the name of the variable. Okay, so now when we go here, we're going to see, we're not going to see this anymore. What we're going to see is my first var on the screen. So there you go. So that's that. Alright. So what else should we look at? Let me have a look. Got a few notes. So we've done controllers briefly. Let's do, where was it? I think we should do directives actually, right? So a directive. What's a directive? Right. So at a high level, directives are markers on a DOM element such as an attribute, element name, comment, or CSS class. And they tell AngularJS's HTML compiler to attach specific behavior to that element or transform the DOM element and its children. So what does that mean? So if you think of it like this, if we had, right, let's sort this out. So let's do, right, let's just have some content. So let's have a h1, and then we'll have a p tag. And what we'll do, is we'll give some content. Let me just and we'll have let's just add a span just so we've got a few bits and bobs going on. Right, so you have to use your imagination a little bit and imagine that this was, or do you know what? Let's just copy it a few times. There we go, we've got a sufficient amount of content. So if you think of this, this could be, I don't know, it could be anything. There's no restrictions what this could be. This could be a load of HTML. It could be hundreds of lines long. So what we can do to ease the burden of having to maintain our content, I guess, what we can do is we can cut all this out and put it into a kind of include file. But first, what we need to do is we need to create a directive. So what we'll do is we'll come into UpJS below here, and what we'll do is we'll create a directive. So what you do is put app, and remember app is referencing our module. Right, so we do app.directive, and then very similar to controller, we say the name. So I'll just put testing directives, the directive. Right. So we do that, and then we have the function. Okay. And inside the function, we're going to return something. So what are we going to return? What we're going to do is we're going to tell the page that if we put this directive, we are going to, that says return, what we're going to do, if we put this directive, we are going to be returned this content that we specify here. So first, what you can do is you can restrict. Okay, and what restrict does is restrict is telling the page what content is valid. So with restrict, what we're saying is we are looking, E stands for elements. What we're saying is if you see this directive, it has to be an element. So by element, we mean something in like a div. Okay, that's an element. So we're saying we want it to be an element, and then what we're going to do is we're going to say look at this template URL. So what we'll do is we'll put it in a views folder, and then we'll call it the same name, testing directive.html. Okay, and then that is it for that. So what we want to do is we want to create this page, don't we? So let's come out of here. Let's create a views folder. Oh, we've already got a views folder. Oh, of course we have, yeah. Okay. Sorry, let me just put templates on here. Forgot we already had a views folder. Okay, so let's create a templates folder. Where are we? So in templates, what we want to do is we're going to change directives into there, and then we want to create the folder. So we've just created our template file. So we've got this file, and what we're going to do is we're going to take all of this content, put it in here, and then we're going to reference it within our controller. And what we're going to do is we're just going to do testing directive, okay? Just went to load this page and I realised something that I forgot to mention completely, okay? So when you're calling your directive, what you need to do is you need to ensure that you change it. This is something I didn't mention at all, and I should have straight away. Right. So when you create a directive, the name is in Camel Case, okay? Which just means the first word starts with lowercase, the next word there's no space, and it starts with an uppercase letter, okay? So we create it like this, but when we are calling the directive, we can't do it in Camel Case. What we need to do is we need to split the words like this, okay? So if you don't do that, when you go to call it, it won't be rendered to the page. So now, if we start the server, what we'll see is that's the contents of our directive being printed onto the screen. And then when we look at our HTML, it's really clean, and all we have to do is write this in there. So it's really easy to swap these directives out or have multiple and switch them around. Really easy, and you don't have to go through loads of elements. Okay, you don't have to go through hundreds and hundreds of lines looking for one thing. You can split it all into groups and you're done. So it's excellent. Directives are excellent. They're such a time saver and such a good way if you want to create some sort of template engine for yourself, or you create websites for people and you want to have a stack of these pre-built directives for looping through content, or a details page for something, you know, or a list view and have different kinds of lists. Directives are perfect because all we need to do is okay, right, and let's think of this then. Let's duplicate this page and we'll change the content to something else, right? So what we'll do, let's create another directive just under here, and we'll just call it test directive 2, right? So what we're going to do, I'm just going to duplicate it really quickly. Right, so in here, let's completely change this. Let's right, so we've saved that, added it there. So now let's change this to 2. It's the our server. So now what you can see is from literally, in terms of our HTML, from literally just changing the name of this directive, we have completely different content. So what we could do is we could include both of those. Make sure the name's right. I'll have to restart. So now what we're going to get is we've got our first directive and our second one. So imagine you had hundreds of these. Think how easy it will be to sort your content out. And then again, it'll just be the opposite way around. Okay, directives, excellent. So let me just have a look at my notes and see if there's anything else I want to go through. So I showed you, I created this controller, but I can see in my notes I've got another paragraph. So let me just read this, I think. Let's have a look. So a controller is a JavaScript constructor function that is used for the Angular scope. When a controller is attached to the DOM via ng controller, Angular will instantiate a new controller object. Using the specified controller's constructor function, a new child scope will be available as an injectable parameter to the controller's constructor function as $scope. So that pretty much, I think that's from the Angular website, I believe. So I think all that's saying is you create a controller and you give it this scope parameter, which we talked about earlier, and what that does is that gives you a variable scope for your controller. So I think it pretty much stops you from polluting the global scope with loads of variables, which anyone used to JavaScript web apps or apps in general, or just working with JavaScript, will know you want to control the global scope. So that's why in Titanium it's good practice to use CommonJS and things like that. But yeah, so that's all that's doing. So I believe I might leave it there because I don't know how long I've been recording. I think it's a while. I may do down the line. What I think I'll do is I'll leave this as it is for a quick introduction to Angular, but I think I'll do a more detailed Angular set of videos and go through HTML5 routing and a lot of other stuff. I think I'll definitely do a video on SEO with Angular, which is can be quite tricky, and also maybe go through Grunt and stuff, but that'll be outside of this series of videos. So I think I'll do a separate set of Angular videos. Okay, well, anyway, hope that's all good. If there's any questions, just send me an email, and I'm going to try and do the Mongo video as soon as possible. Don't quote me, but it shouldn't take as long as this has taken. Okay, I'm going to try and get it all done. Right, cheers for watching.